Hello, everyone, or more accurately, Happy Halloween. It is that time of the year where I talk about something truly terrifying for this channel, and so we shall be talking about something that is absolutely horrific and dangerous that everyone across the world pretty much talks about and is concerned about how it will affect us all. Today, I, the douche with the noose, shall be giving my political opinions, specifically talking about Donald Trump and his financial war against China. Okay, maybe that is a bit much, so let's talk about something that's less scary and controversial. The power scaling of Godzilla in Hell. To be even more exact, I'll be putting Godzilla up against another infamous reptilian monster in fiction, SCP-682 from the SCP Foundation. Given I am slowly becoming an SCP channel, it was a bit inevitable for me to talk about SCP-682, one of the most popular, or should I say, infamous SCPs out there, and is held in especially high regard in the power scaling community, given its nature as an immortal and almost unstoppable monster. As for what inspired me to make this video, aside from it being Halloween, it was this video made by another power scaling channel named KLTM Chronicles. I don't really think the arguments are valid, but I still found myself enjoying it. I actually have listened to it numerous times as I was doing work and all that. And really, the actual validity of these arguments aren't the point of this video. The video will basically be about how well this Godzilla with all these arguments would fare against the insanity that is extended canon SCP-682. If you want to know the arguments for Godzilla, check out his video, and if you want an idea on how powerful SCP-682 is, then check out my profile on him, both of which can be found in the description of this video. Before, before we get into the analysis and fight, I must make a couple of things clear, set up some guidelines, so to speak. Yes, I will be giving Godzilla all of his available author statements, alongside his Dungeons and Dragons scaling. But that will be it. KOTM brings up the possibility of this Godzilla potentially scaling to the cosmologies of DC and Marvel, which won't be a factor here. Not only am I just not qualified to talk about their cosmologies, but it is never clear in what actual version but it's never clear what actual version of these verses is being referred to. Also, just kind of a moot point anyway, because you can similarly say that the SCP cosmology encapsulates these other cosmologies too, and many more, with them being referenced numerous times in articles. Dungeons and Dragons will be all the cross-scaling he will get, since it can actually be directly linked to Godzilla thanks to the IDW cosmology, and I will be using the two cosmology blocks KOTM in his video links in the description. Alongside this, I will also be talking about the amplifications that Godzilla receives in the comics, those being Divine Godzilla and Hellbat Godzilla. As for SCP-62, I will be using extended canon, using all of his appearances across the SCP wiki. I will primarily be talking about the SCP-682 avatar, leaving out higher forms like the Leviathan, SCP-6820-A, and the Constant of Termination. Lastly, a strange thing that I've come to notice is that Godzilla and Hell fans tend to not really specify what tiering system they are using, or really explain how exactly high into these tiers that Godzilla is. They just kind of vaguely say he is high into these tiers and sort of ignore the differences between the possible definitions for high out reversal and so on. For example, KOTM in his video doesn't specify which tiering system he goes by, but going off how he argues his stuff, he seems to be basing his arguments on by the character stats and profiles wiki definition for out reversal. However, his arguments are based on blogs from Versus Battles Wiki and the All Fiction Battles Wiki, which are unique from CSCP. So for the sake of transparency and to avoid confusion, I will be using Versus Battles Wiki's definitions, and I will be explaining the exact power levels of these two characters as best as I can. With all things being said and done, let's get into the video. The big argument of Godzilla and Hell comes from various Word of God statements from Twitter. There being numerous statements that we can use to say that Godzilla scales to the entirety of IDW's cosmology, or Megaverse. Godzilla himself, arguably in his base form, is directly said to be capable of destroying the IDW Megaverse, all of its universes, dimensions, and realms. In issue 3, Godzilla will receive an amplification from God that allowed him to easily destroy Space Godzilla, who was previously overpowering his base form. With this power, he seemingly kills God, just going off what we see in the comics, and the angels praising him, worshipping him as the new God. But numerous times, the authors have said that Godzilla actually killed God here, so he should genuinely scale. God, or the God Mountain, is confirmed to have created everything, which encompasses the IDW cosmology, and Godzilla in this state achieved the same status as God himself. This was done when Godzilla was amped, as afterwards we see that Godzilla is no longer glowing with purple energy, clearly entailing this power is gone, but an author has somewhat confirmed that Godzilla kept this power with him saying that he is now God, meaning that this power is now integrated within him. Later on, Godzilla would face the Demon God in issue 5, which was described as Godzilla's most challenging opponent and an unstoppable force, meaning that it would scale above the aforementioned god. Godzilla was completely hopeless here, but by fusing with an army of Hellbats, thus obtaining the Hellbat form, Godzilla was able to muster up a big enough blast of his atomic breath to not just kill, but utterly destroy the demon god, allowing him to finally leave Hell. So base Godzilla alone scales to the IDW Megaverse, and he has two transformations that make him greatly stronger, but to an unquantifiable extent. So how big is the IDW cosmology? Well, it is argued that all of these various properties of IDW are part of the one big cosmology, with Godzilla in particular having crossovers with the Power Rangers and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. All of these franchises would exist within the same multiverse of multiverses, but the most important of them all would be Dungeons and Dragons, which IDW has made comics for. I will be linking the cosmology blogs I'm using here in the description. If you want to read them yourself, go there. If not, here's a quick summarization. The lowest point in the Dungeons and Dragons cosmology consists of infinite spatial dimensions, with the furthest regions of the multiverse being known as the outer planes, which exist beyond these dimensions entirely, and the concept of distance itself is completely meaningless there. So right off the bat, the verse is high hyperversal, with a baseline outerversal structure scaling above it. But while the places in the outer planes are said to have layers, infinite layers, there's nothing proving or entailing that these layers have real cosmological significance, like anything that would show that they have qualitative superiorities over each other, or really anything that would make it anything more than just baseline outerversal. Beyond the outer planes is the Far Realm, which is the home of entities known as Old Ones, stand-ins for dungeon masters that see the cosmology beneath them as dreams or fragments of their imagination. It has its own series of outerversal statements, but they don't matter. This alone would mean that it has a qualitative superiority over the outer planes, making it 2 layers high in outerversal. Of absolutely all of this, we have the luminous being, the supreme being of the verse that sees it all, including the old ones, as fiction. This totals the verse at 3 layers, or 3 qualitative superiorities high into outerversal. Assuming the IDW Megaverse encompasses all of this and no caveats, Godzilla would scale above all of this. Honestly, not that distant from other versions of Godzilla. Oh, wait, hold on. and really just kind of far away from being the strongest character in fiction. Still powerful, but there are absolutely other god characters that scale above him. This version of Godzilla doesn't really have any hacks of his own. It's like the Doomslayer in the sense that he's a physical brawler most of the time, but has a few abilities that aid him. The only one that would be worth talking about here is the level of adaptation that Godzilla showcases in the comic. It isn't much, but just seems to grow stronger in power really quickly. This is perfectly demonstrated in issue 1, where he had a fight against a doppelganger of himself. Initially, this fake Godzilla was wiping the floor with Godzilla, just kind of thrashing him around like a child, and even his atomic breath didn't do much against the guy at first. But after a few seconds of being bullied by him, he suddenly had enough power to reduce the doppelganger Godzilla to blade chunks with one atomic breath blast that, as shown before, would have just slashed off a few tendrils at worst. The other main piece of evidence comes from issue 2, where Godzilla was initially unable to properly fight King Ghidorah to the point that he decided to run away instead, with Ghidorah's power excessively being said to be too great for Godzilla. However, in issue 4, Godzilla can be was like fighting both King Ghidorah and Destroy at the same time. So Godzilla is capable of getting stronger the more he fights, on top of his two amplifications. So overall, Godzilla's power consists of three qualitative superiorities, or three layers high and outerversal. He has some transformations that make him far stronger than before, albeit to an unquantifiable, non-qualitative extent. And has some passive ability where he just gets stronger the more he fights, akin to Goku, for instance. All pretty impressive and respectable. Now let's talk about his opponent. In order to understand how strong SCP-682 can be, we must know how he works in the first place. In SCP-682-0, and to a lesser extent the story Reptilius, it is revealed to us that SCP-682 is essentially the avatar of a conceptual being who encompasses the very concept of adaptability. He is the literal embodiment of adaptation as a power, which very clearly shows as he physically is an adaptive shapeshifter, whose form and power changes in direct proportion to whatever he is faced with, whatever power is exerted onto him. This adaptation could come in a variety of forms. It could be just like Godzilla, where he just gains boosts in physical capabilities, but he's also capable of becoming completely immune to what he's faced with, developed a superior version of what was used against him, or developed an entirely new ability and or trait that serves as the exact counter to what he is facing. This is the exact reason why SCP-682 seems to vary as much as he does in power. He inherently starts off not so powerful, like large building level, but is capable of reaching far greater levels of power if faced with it. For example, if base form SCP-682 with no prior adaptations were to fight the Doomslayer, they would get absolutely destroyed, utterly obliterated in one hit at first. However, he would come back and now suddenly has enough power to rival or even surpass the Doomslayer, which he uses to kill or fight off the Doomslayer. Similarly, if this same SCP-682 were to go up against Pennywise, who decided to immediately use the Deadlights against him, SCP-682 would be subject to their effects at first, only for him to either become completely immune to the Deadlights or develop his own version of the Deadlights, but better. Broadly speaking, this is how SCP-682's reactive evolution works, and it is kind of true that he has done this to pretty much any ability you can think of. Like, he has a history of resisting mind-related abilities, even on a cosmic level from high outerversal beings. So there was a really high chance that Pennywise's Deadlights back there just didn't work in the first place. Really, any ability that SCP-682 didn't inherently exist, he would just adapt and become immune shortly afterwards. So how powerful and insane are the adaptation abilities of SCP-682? Well, I admittedly left out a part of how SCP-682's adaptation works because it will make more sense here. During a cross-test with SCP-7700, it's revealed that the immortalities of SCP-682 and Dr. Sumerian are actually comparable, with SCP-682 saying that Sumerian is just like him in how he is cursed to live by the narrative. Sumerian has a probability-based anomaly that follows him around and essentially manipulates possibilities in order to constantly ensure that Dr. Sumerian is alive. It constantly ensures his survival. The interesting part of this power is that it is caused by author entities or editors from the proxyverse, with Sumerian's author wanting Sumerian to never die. Sumerian's author literally wrote him to be unkillable, and as such, the narrative or patosphere constantly bullshits things to where he lives. Of course, SCP-682 would have a similar ability, but likely even superior. It is remarked that even other author entities within the proxyverse struggle to kill SCP-682, which is actually why the termination log exists. All of those entries are proxyverse editors attempting to kill SCP-682, but but he always lives outside of a very few instances. This would mean that through the influence of godly authors, the cap of SCP-682's powers stem from the patosphere. While I won't be explaining how powerful and huge the patosphere and proxyverse authors are, they both deserve their own videos. You can find my own blog in the description where I explain in depth just how huge and powerful these things are. Just know that given how SCP's cosmology is, this would already make SCP-682's peak ridiculously high in a high reversal. This would also mean that SCP-682 has some ridiculous other feats because of this, which for the sake of length, I will only be going into one. Among the many termination attempts, there is one to see if SCP-682 can be terminated through pataphysical or metaphysical means, in that they created a book called To Slay the Beast, detailing a massive cosmic fight between SCP-682 and various other SCPs. This battle would escalate into a ZK-class reality failure scenario, an event where reality is fundamentally fucked up by some anomaly. They wrote this book, so its detailed events would occur within a lower narrative of the SCP-3812 narrative stack. More on that later. With SCP-423 going down there to observe the events to see if they occur, and if SCP-682 dies. Naturally, given this is SCP-682, things don't pan out. They actually go pretty damn awfully for those within the narrative. In response to this narrative's creation, SCP-62 rewrote this narrative to where he came out on top. To be exact, he rewrote the narrative to where he neutralized 95% of the anomalies involved, with SCP-682 fending off the remaining 5%, and the subsequent destruction of 77% of the entire observable omniverse, which he also caused. Ever since then, the SCP Foundation has been wary on utilizing pataphysical anomalies against SCP-682. Rightfully so, because that 5% that SCP-682 fended off, that was SCP-3812 himself. Sam motherfucking Howell. These two not only fought, but stalemated, with them both surviving to tell the tale of the fight, which is absolutely crazy for SCP-682. This would mean that the potential of SCP-682's adaptation is directly comparable to the potential of SCP-3812's Ascendance ability. I have an entire video that explains the power of SCP-3812 already on this channel. I would recommend watching that to get an exact estimation of SCP-3812's power, but to summarize, SCP-3812 is a character that is constantly and endlessly transcending into higher and higher levels of reality, also known as narratives. And each of these narratives transcend the concept of space-time, so any one of them would inherently be out-reversal. However, the interesting part is that all of these narratives exist within a hierarchy, where higher-up narratives transcend and see narratives beneath them as completely fiction. Higher-up narratives transcend lower ones in the same way that an out-reversal structure transcends spatial dimensions, and this difference is repeated with each and every single one of these narratives, and there is an infinite amount of them that SCP-3812 is transcending through. So this stack of narratives in its entirety would be high 1-8 plus by Gewsbumpz standards, or 1-S by Character Stats and Profiles Wiki standards. SCP-3812 does have higher potential, which SCP-682 should also be capable of replicating, but I won't be talking about that here. Just go listen to the video. And believe it or not, this level of power is actually consistent. Like one time, where he faced with Calvin Dismet, a human reality warper not only very similar to SCP-3812 inherently, but he has the power to destroy the narrative stack entirely. But despite this crazy level of power, he was unable to harm SCP-682 at all. Pretty crazy stuff, but really, this is still like the lower end of SCP-682's best scaling, which likely deserves its own video someday, let alone the higher up forms like the constant termination. And with that, I close off this section of the video. As laid out in the stats, Godzilla would inherently start off stronger, with them being 3 layers high in out-reversal in comparison to SCP-682's building level. But SCP-682's adaptation is more than capable, allowing it to match Godzilla within a moment's notice. Yes, Godzilla grows in strength over time and has transformations that make him stronger, but he isn't crossing qualitative superiorities like what SCP-682 is doing. Like how Hellbat Godzilla defeated the Demon God, for instance, was just by making a really big energy beam that exceeds his normal atomic breath, which is absolutely quantitative. So really, there is nothing stopping SCP-682 from just utterly transcending Godzilla and what he is capable of, and that will most likely be what will happen. But for the sake of the video and overall analysis, let's go further down into this. Does Godzilla have any abilities that would work on SCP-682? Well, in Issue 2, he is seen fighting numerous kaiju, which are said to be ghosts. And with that, you can see that Godzilla is capable of attacking those on a spiritual level. That would not work on SCP-682, as he just doesn't have a soul to begin with. Like, when faced with the machine that normally takes out souls, it just takes out his consciousness. Similarly, when a torture spell that targets a soul was used on him, it did absolutely nothing. So Godzilla's soul manipulation would just be utterly worthless here. He killed God, who is said to be love itself in this fake scan that for some reason is treated as official stuff by some people, so Godzilla could attack concepts directly. This also wouldn't work on SCP-682, as when SCP-2719, an abstract pointer that is capable of interacting with concepts like SCP-3125, didn't do anything against him. In fact, this actually could be really horrible for Godzilla, because conceptual attacks have proven to get the special attention of SCP-682's higher form, SCP-6820-A. When faced with SCP-5712, which was trying to conceptually subsume him, SCP-682's concept instead killed the entity. If you want a rough idea on how strong SCP-682-0-A is, then watch my Noosphere video. But to put it simply, Godzilla does not want this to happen. Some people argue that Godzilla has some odd fate manipulation that makes sure that he cannot lose, that his victory cannot be taken away from him, quote unquote. Because of that phrase, because of the poem at the end of the series. Even if we do take this as fact, alternations of time like this have also shown to be worthless. Like when he was faced with SCP-140, an anomaly that's capable of rewriting the past, it just didn't do anything. Aside from that, in response, SCP-62 would likely just alter the story itself to ensure his victory as well, such as when SCP-826 was used against him. The SCP Foundation made a story where SCP-62 was guaranteed to die by a monster that they made. And using SCP-826, they caused this story to happen in real life, just for SCP-682 to rewrite the story in his favor. Of course, there is also that SCP-423 cross test, where he rewrote the narrative there too. So, if Godzilla did alter fate somehow, SCP-62 would do the same thing, but even better, and thus win. I could go on, but if I did, we would be here for too long. You get the point regardless. There really isn't an ability that SCP-62 doesn't have an answer for. Even in terms of survivability, Godzilla is outclassed. Like, SCP-62 regularly survives getting absolutely fucked up, with one of the best examples being where he survived being reduced to 1% of his fucking body mass, let alone his regeneration that allows him to come back from being erased from existence, along other things like the protection of his higher up forms and all that. Like, it generally takes some incredibly goddamn insane stuff to kill SCP-682, like SCP-2747 and SCP-2935, who are absolutely insane. Hell, like, aside from the literally strongest SCPs out there, the only thing that are noticeably capable of actually killing instances of SCP-682 are other SCP-682s. Yeah, that is right. One of the very few things that are capable of negating the immortality, regeneration, and other stupid shit that SCP-682's adaptation is capable of doing are other SCP-682s. Compare this to Godzilla in issue 4 being able to regenerate after having his head cut off while fighting other kaiju with the same regeneration, but was unable to actually kill them. It doesn't really look that great for Godzilla here. This is all ignoring the various hacks that SCP-62 is capable of obtaining through his adaptation, which would not be necessary within this fight. If you want to see all of that, I have an exhaustive overview of a profile on SCP-62 that you can find in the description. Realistically, the fight would start off with SCP-682 getting immediately nuked by Godzilla, only for him to come back shortly afterwards and then proceed to nuke Godzilla back, with very little variation beyond that. In my humble opinion and general outlook on power scaling, SCP-682 wins this fight. Believe it or not, this fight would actually be way more interesting and fair if we just didn't give Godzilla these crazy high-end and, to be frank, wank set of arguments. If we just used what is given to us in the comics themselves, then put that Godzilla up against Article Canon SCP-682, so anything made by the original author of SCP-682, it would actually be a far more fair and intriguing debate. Again, if you want like a full, comprehensive stat sheet of SCP-682's capabilities, like all of his abilities, important feats, and various forms across the history of SCP, go check out my SCP-682 profile linked in the description. While you're there, you can also find other goodies like my SCP Cosmology blog and other pages for anomalies like SCP-3812 and SCP-2747. That wiki is also my home for the Doomslayer for my Doomslayer page, which if you're familiar with, if you're a Doom fan, you're almost guaranteed to have seen something from it. Now, to the Godzilla and Hell fans that are likely in the comment section right now, like about to be toxic and claim that I downplay Godzilla and Hell somehow, or somehow I did not do my research on him despite the entirety of this video. I pretty clearly didn't downplay Godzilla in this video. I gave him his Word of God statements. I gave him his IDW Megaverse cross scaling. And even gave him the Dungeons and Dragons cosmology cross scaling. I scaled him accordingly, utilizing the stuff you people have been using for years now, and he still lost. I guess you could get on my ass for not using the weird Twin Peaks arguments, but that comes from an unofficial magazine called Armadillo Droppings. And the part that it comes from basically amounts to a bunch of friends making shit up and should not at all be like considered a proper scan or a word of God statement. I did not treat Godzilla unfairly, and I even gave like a proper and exact estimation of his power instead of vaguely saying he's really high in Outerversal, because I am just not clueless when it comes to how these tiers work. He lost fair and square, and there are many other god characters many other characters from actually powerful verses like SCP that would do the same to Godzilla. Anyway, that'll be it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Feel free to leave your thoughts within the comments, and have a good day.